Very good afternoon to all of those who are joining me live on the Facebook page of News 9. I'm Neha. Now, former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Dr. Farooq Abdullah raked up a massive controversy by stating that Kashmiris do not feel Indians at this moment and they would rather be ruled by Chinese. Dr. Abdullah claimed that the people of Kashmir have lost faith on the current Modi-led BJP government. He also wonders if the government will find someone who wishes to call himself Indian. He says, and I quote, "To be honest, I wonder whether they, that's the government, will find someone who will call himself an Indian. You go and talk to anybody, they do not want to know. Not Pakistanis, let me be very clear about it, but they do not feel Indian. And us who have to speak, I wonder whether we will survive." That's not it. While hitting out at the Modi government, the former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir also said that many in the valley would prefer to go to China. As I also mentioned earlier, now he says today China is advancing on the other side. Many, if you talk to them, they would rather have Chinese coming in. Whatever one may say, they know what Chinese have done to Muslims in their region. I'm not serious, but I'm honest about it. I'm honestly telling you what people do not want to hear. They would rather not go to Pakistan because everything is rust, quote unquote. A seemingly irked Abdullah while speaking about the abrogation of Article 370 and how the people of the valley have taken it, says the central government would be living in delusion if they think people have accepted the abrogation of Article 370 in August last year. Now, to speak more about what really prompted Dr. Abdullah to say this, joining me over the phone line is senior journalist Mr. Aditya Rajkol. Thank you very much, Aditya, first of all, for taking out some time and speaking to News 9. Now, Aditya, do tell us, Dr. Farooq Abdullah has said Kashmiris do not think they are Indian and would rather be ruled by China. What is your reaction to these statements?
Well, firstly, Neha, I don't know if I should laugh or I should be angry at such a statement because let me be very clear at the very beginning that nobody in Kashmir really takes Farooq Abdullah seriously. And at a time when Farooq Abdullah was under house arrest, I didn't see even a single Kashmiri coming out and protesting in support of Farooq Abdullah. So one can imagine the lack of support that Farooq Abdullah, such ridiculous statements really have on ground in Kashmir. Secondly, he touched upon China as well. Instead of condemning the kind of illegal transgression that the Chinese PLA has been doing in Ladakh, he goes on to say that Kashmiris would enjoy and perhaps be happy under the Chinese regime, when perhaps, Mr. Farooq Abdullah, we would like to remind you that do you know about the Uyghur concentration camps, the death camps that are being run by the Chinese? Because, the reality remains this, that the Muslims in China are being persecuted, they are being humiliated, there are no fundamental rights that are being enjoyed by them. So is he, the former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Farooq Abdullah, suggesting that he would voluntarily submit his children and family members to the Uyghur death camps and suffer the ethnic cleansing and genocide that's underway? So this is a very ridiculous and atrocious statement that will be condemned not just by Kashmiris but anybody in India. And I don't again see a point because Farooq Abdullah again is known over the last 3 decades particularly of changing his colors. He has a very different tune once he is in Srinagar. It changes once he lands in Jammu. And he speaks an entirely different language once he is in New Delhi, whether inside the parliament or outside. So I think Farooq Abdullah is entirely wrong, and it's almost a mockery of the people who have voted for him. He's a member of parliament. He has a very dignified position, and I think he should be mature enough to learn from his son, the maturity of the day, and not make such ridiculous statements and make a mockery of himself in front of the common public.
Right. Aditya, have people of the valley not really welcomed abrogation of Article 370? And if so, then why is that? Do you feel that people, somewhere lost faith in the Modi government because of the abrupt abrogation?
See, Neha, I don't want to get into the politics of BJP, National Conference, Congress and other political parties. Yes, there might be some differences in ideology, there might be differences in opinion over Article 370. But under the Indian democracy, there is a parliament, there is a legislative assembly, and there are other mechanisms that are there to discuss such important issues. And I don't see a point of making such ridiculous statements, whether it is on Article 370 or any other issue. I was there on ground in Kashmir after the application of Article 370. There weren't any massive protests that were witnessed on ground. Yes, I would be honest and say that people were upset with the way internet was disconnected. 4G was not available either in Jammu or in Srinagar or in other parts and districts of the Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory. But it doesn't mean that there was any kind of volatility or violence or protest. In fact, if you go according to the statistics, the violence and even terror attacks have drastically reduced over the last 1 year or so. So I don't see a point where people are, absolutely upset with Article 370. Yes, there would be genuine grievances. We should also realize that there are some pending cases before the Supreme Court of India, and the court will finally decide what the right decision would be. But it is the Indian Parliament that took a call under the given laid down laws, and one should respect that.
All right, Aditya, but Dr. Abdullah claims that if the troops are withdrawn from the valley, one will get to witness people coming out in huge numbers to protest against the abrogation. So, what gives him the confidence to say this even after a year of the abrogation?
To be honest, because I've witnessed and being an observer of the politics and terrorism and violence in Kashmir Valley over the last few years, there is now a growing competition between the National Conference and the PDP in Kashmir to gain the sympathy, to gain the support of the radical, the fundamentalists and the extremist elements. Because, the separatists have lost relevance over the last 1 year. We don't see any kind of Hurriyat Conference or JKLF or the Jamaati elements relevant either in South Kashmir or across the valley. We don't see any kind of, separatist-led protests, stone pelting, etc. So that's why there's a growing urge within the National Conference leadership and also the PDP to get this kind of momentum and radical support so that they benefit in the elections. But I don't see, apart from that, kind of support that they seek, there is any relevance to such statements that he makes. I don't see any massive protests happening. Yes, there has been a lot of propaganda coming in from the Pakistani side. Pakistan has been vehemently trying its best to provoke and instigate violence in the Kashmir Valley, but that hasn't happened over the last 1 year. And Farooq Abdullah and his alike people in Kashmir will have to realize that things have changed post-abrogation of Article 370. Farooq Abdullah is as Indian as I am or as you are. We are, of course, Neha, you and I are Kashmiris as well. But he will have to realize that things have changed. The kind of politics that he or his other party colleagues stood for over the years, where he talked about autonomy or self-determination or any other such things, are not relevant today. And he will have to seek whatever he does under the Indian democracy. Yes, he can criticize the BJP and Modi government. That is his right, and one should. But doesn't, making anti-national statements or, provoking the public to violence is not something that people should tolerate.
Right. Aditya, lastly, leaders like Dr. Farooq, his son Umar, Mehbooba and other leaders like these still relevant in the valley any longer?
Well, if you ask the common public on the streets of Kashmir, I don't think so. Because, firstly, as I mentioned earlier, Neha, that there was not a single massive protest that was witnessed after Mehbooba Mufti, Farooq Abdullah and Umar Abdullah were taken under house arrest. We didn't see any kind of shutdown. We didn't see any kind of stone pelting or even violence taking place. So who is unhappy once Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah and others were, under house arrest? Because, what they have stood for over the last many years is corruption and not governance. And Kashmir needs good governance. Kashmir needs development. It needs peace. It needs, to a great extent, reconciliation efforts and some kind of positive energy as well, because there's been a lot of negativity. There's been a lot of negative news. Of course, media is to blame also, fair share of blame. But apart from that, the politicians have ruined Kashmir, be it, from the ruling party, be it from the opposition. And, I won't spare even the BJP, because the kind of corruption that we've seen, by all the political, national and regional political parties in J&K has been, insane. So I think things are changing slowly on ground. There's a lot that needs to be done. Anti-Corruption Bureau in J&K has also taken a lot of steps over the last 1 year. But, I think these politicians have lost relevance, and there should be a new breed of politicians that should come in. And in fact, these politicians should also realize that they're standing at a cusp of history. Either they give Kashmiris a chance for development and good governance, or they get forgotten in the dustbin of history.
Right. Thank you very much, Aditya, for joining us with all of those insights. Well, that